going to attempt to do this without the mic. If you're in the back row and you can't hear me, just point to the sky and it'll get louder. Are we okay so far? We good? School must have started. I had about 8 phone calls this week alone of parents calling me going, my kid, isn't separating, they can't get to class, kindergarten through like 3rd grade. Kids in high school, stressed out about starting high school. It's just like something is in the water. I'm stressed this morning because my daughter is about 15 hours away from being in the eye of the storm. She's in South Carolina right now. I talked to her last night, so I text her and I go, call me immediately, or call me as soon as you can. She's like, I can't right now. So then we're going back and forth texting. And then finally she calls and I'm like, what's going on? She's like, we're having a party. Like, for God's sake, what is this, a hurricane coming party? They will find any excuse to have a party. They're like, school's closed all week, we're good. I'm like, okay, my heart rate went down a little bit, but let's go over the provisions that you have in your house right now. I got it all handled. We filled up the bathtub with water, we have batteries. I'm like, okay. Make sure you're not on social media on your phone, because when the power goes dead, you won't have a phone in about 2 hours. So hopefully she'll be okay as soon as she's on the second story. So a little stressed, but we'll be all right. Like Susan was saying, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I see the gamut. I see kids, everything from anxiety issues, post-traumatic stress, dealing with divorce, depression, loss of a family member. So I've seen it all. And had to deal with it. Now, today's just going to be about stress, but I'm going to talk about the array of stress, because guess what? Stress is not all bad. Stress is actually one of the things that people need to know is that we need stress. In fact, there was some research I was reading when I was preparing for this that stress actually helps us live longer. It helps us cope. So we need a certain amount. Okay, so that's one of the walkways, because I'm going to go through the grim list of here's all the bad things that can happen, okay? But I don't want you to start thinking oh my gosh, this is all bad, very, very bad. It's not, okay? So one of the things that I'm going to try to make clear today is stress is about a perception. It's a physical response to a perceived threat. It's a leftover of the evolutionary process, there's a tiger, heart rate needs to go up, blood needs to go to certain parts of the body, I need to get out of here, okay? So that's where it essentially comes from. It was to mobilize the body. It's a little bit overused at this point, because now it's oh my God, I have a test coming up, there's the tiger, heart rate goes up, I'm not sleeping, and we start perceiving the world in a really threatening way. If there's anything you walk away from in this talk today, it's helping kids be able to perceive things not as much as a threat, okay? And you're not off the hook. I'm going to start with you guys, because sometimes parents are coming in and go, what? You got a C on that test? And then you hit the fan, and then everybody's escalating. We're going to get to all that. So again, it was necessary to keep from danger. One of the things that we got to do is normalize it. It is inevitable. It is going to occur. All right, so we have positive stress. Guess what? Positive stress are the things like, hey, going to a new school. Real quick, how many of you are new to this school? Welcome, excellent, fantastic. Oh, real quick poll. How many of you have kids in elementary school? Okay, middle school and high school. All right. Everybody buckle up. So the positive stress are the situations where it's you have a performance. You have a performance coming up. You're the lead role, or you're not the lead role. You have a recital. You have a sports performance. Something is going on that you are preparing for. Normal amount of stress. Don't start escalating or thinking it's pathological. They're I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm having trouble getting out of bed. That's natural. It will happen. Tolerable stress. It's interesting, because when I was reading this, I'm like, I don't know, those things look like really not healthy levels of stress. But like I said, I've seen it all. I've seen people go through a great deal. That even things like a death of a pet, someone getting in an accident or switching schools, getting divorced, those are things that kids can't handle. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. but kids can handle, we're going to talk about resilience today. Kids can handle one pretty major life event. You throw two in there, people start to unravel. Okay? But one really big size event, still tolerable, and we'll get to the next part of it. What's going to take it either positive or toxic is guess what? How the parents deal with it, how like the kids like kind of natural reactivity is. Because we're going to talk about factors of like resilience and children like who are predisposed towards anxiety. By the way, this entire presentation will be both on the website, I believe, at Viewpoint, and it'll be on my website, fultonpsychologicalgroup.com. So just so you know, it'll be the entire presentation will be on there, both in a video and just the PowerPoint. Okay. So if you want to, don't get stressed that you're not. Like, oh my God, I don't remember that one thing. I'll make sure. And email me if I forget to put it up this weekend. All right, the toxic stress. Now we're talking about things that, like, if we have two major life events. Now, divorce can turn into two major life events because it could be like, hey, parents are in different households. You're having to go back and forth. Okay, that's one. Well, now let's say if we add like, oh, the kids had to move. Now they don't have their friend group. Maybe there's a money loss, a conflict. So if you start adding a whole bunch of other variables, that's when divorce gets a little wonky to the kids. Okay. So divorce in of itself isn't going to traumatize them into a toxic stress. It's all the situations around it. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm going to allow for questions, and that's fine, about the presentation. One of the things I want to make sure that we don't get into is either a Dr. Laura or Loveline situation, where you're asking about things that I'm trying to understand about your kids specifically. I will be here for about an hour afterwards, so if there are questions, no problem, I'll be here for a while, but please, through this presentation, I want this to be interactive, and so if you have questions about what's going on, please don't hesitate. Okay, the toxic stress, we're going to talk about what that leads to, but that is going to cause kids to unravel. Okay, that's when you need to go get the support, like Susan was saying, either from the school or outside help, because that will lead to everything from emotional issues and even physical. Questions about this so far? Thoughts? So coming just from school, even though it's stressful, you're going to be okay. All right, quick Psych 101. How many of you remember this graph? There is an optimal amount of anxiety. Like I said, anxiety is important. How many of you have kids that procrastinate a little bit? A little bit. And so what happens is that sometimes kids and adults need a certain amount of anxiety to kind of get their mojo going, to actually be able to get motivated. Not all. Some actually just rely or more rely on things like motivation. But some people need a certain amount of stress just to actually, be able to study. And it drives us crazy. How many of us drive you crazy? You're like, really? You're creating all this stress on me because now you're waiting to the last minute. Procrastination, unfortunately, is also a big culprit of stress. They're stressed too. Because how many of your kids waited to the last minute and now their anxiety is through the roof? They're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that there's like 20 more pages that I should have known. And so now their stress is trying to help the kids with procrastination. It doesn't help. But know that sometimes they need, a little bit of time before their anxiety goes up enough to where they're motivated. Last questions. Everyone pass that Psych 101 now. All right, top stressors. Any guesses? Social? Okay. High school, I'd say, social is definitely in the top 2 or 3. Any other guesses? What other guesses we got?
Homework.
Homework? Okay.
Parents.
Well, we're talking generally, but let's say, parents could be probably starting at about, 12, 13? Amazing how stupid I got at about 13 years old as a kid. And by the way, I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, so I'll be referencing them quite often in some of the stories. So one of the top ones is schoolwork. Okay. And again, it's not just the actual schoolwork, it's the perception of the schoolwork. I'm going to talk about kids and parents who get into what we call the perfection-failure dichotomy. Like, oh my God, I gotta get an A. I just had a client and she got straight A's through high school. And I'm like, get ready for college. You're not going to get straight A's through college. And I'm spending all my time getting ready for the B. I actually hope that the person gets a B because why? Does anyone know why I'm not like a masochistic person? All right. I have kids who come to me. I had a whole bunch of them over the summer. Kids who had a fear of vomiting. And I would say to them, God, I hope you throw up. You're just being not. Because once you do it, you'll stop being afraid of it. Because, the vomiting part is just a short period, right? God willing. But the anxiety about it is like, the entire time. I mean, I've had kids who wouldn't go to school because they were afraid, because Johnny 2 days before in class ended up vomiting. They're like, I'm not going there. Yeah, no, please. This is what it's about.
Did you see the Atlantic article yesterday about kids who are lobbying to reduce the class activities that require public speaking or even contributing in class because they have social anxiety about speaking in front of groups? So they're actually lobbying their schools to reduce the demand on speaking in front of the
I haven't seen that. You know what the number one fear is, though?
Public speaking.
More than death is public speaking. There's like, I go through.
But it's an interesting question because the schools are actually contemplating, are we hurting children by forcing them to push through the anxiety they feel about public speaking or speaking in front of groups, or are we helping them by challenging them and exposing them to that?
And it brings up a really important question. And Viewpoint's good about having kids present and being in front of people. I personally and professionally believe it is a great skill, and I have a tendency, you have to know my bias, I tend to put kids in the thick of things. I'm a strong believer is that, if you come to me and your comfort zone is fairly narrow, I'm going to keep pushing you to try to expand that comfort zone, because I think happiness, meaningful, there's a difference between meaningful happiness and joyful happiness. But meaningful happiness gets created by having those experiences. So it's interesting, and but there are people who are true introverts. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because their stress is just being in a social arena. And sometimes it's okay to let them retreat a little bit. So I see both sides of it, but I would probably tend to push kids. All right, so schoolwork obviously is one of the biggest ones, because, and especially as they get older, it just gets more demanding, more challenging. Conflicts with family members, and that goes up. And it's natural, by the way, because I get a lot of parents who come in and they're like, God, my 15-year-old goes in their room and they don't come out. And I call it, oh, these are the bat cave years. They go up there and they literally don't need to come out, for a long time. Don't have a refrigerator in the room for God's sake. They'll never see that. But it's one of the things that just a certain amount of conflict is natural. Understand it. I'm going to talk about how to limit it a bit, and feel free, throw up questions. Those are the type of questions I really like. Problems with friends, that's a big one. Again, as they get older, when the kids are young, it's a little easier. Everyone in the classroom is their friend, but it starts to get more serious by about 4th, 5th grade. Middle school is actually the research has shown us the worst years of their entire life. By the laughs, I see some agreement. They're rough years. Quick side, our hypothesis, you're going through a lot of physical changes. You're going through a lot of changes socially, and then also with respect to how you see yourself. So lots of change. Okay, as the kids get older, romantic relationships, problems at school. And that could be, conflicts with teacher, conflicts with friends at school. Also, parental, like if parents have issues of psychiatric issues, like if they're depressed. It's interesting. I read a study a long time ago that if neurologically, if the parent was depressed, they measured the serotonin levels of the child and they were lower. And the child ended up being predisposed towards depression. Isn't that amazing? It's just, and we're learning more and more. It's fascinating about neural mapping, that if you have kind of a chronic situation, the brain kind of rewires itself and then is predisposed to that. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about that. If you have really high stress for long periods of time, it's going to remap the brain. And you got to be very careful about that because then they're going to be predisposed towards anxiety and things like that. Drugs in the violent neighborhood, and then of course our cramped schedules. One of my thoughts about this, again, that I think is a top stressor, again, because I'm a cognitive kind of psychologist, I go into, it's also the perception. I've been dealing with a lot of parents, especially in, I have a senior right now. We're about to go into college applications. Believe me, I'm in the thick of the stress of things as well, and I've seen each stress, along the way. But I could say that a lot of it comes from our perception that, well, if he doesn't get into the absolute best college, then his life will be miserable. When we start thinking that way, guess what? You took a process that could have been manageable. It just made it really unmanageable for you and your child. Okay? I can tell you, because I've seen now a child who's gone to college, that it's there's a college for everybody, and we'll get through that. Okay? So don't let your anxiety end up, and we'll talk about that too, bleeding into theirs. Okay. The first, the next 4 slides, I'm going to go through it, and it's going to talk about the negative things about stress, but hold firm, we're going to talk about things and how to cope with this, okay? I'll be Captain Obvious, and yes, emotional and behavioral signs of stress, the restlessness and nervousness. But how many of you have kids that get cranky when they get anxious? So a little story. So my daughter's going to 6th grade. She's in middle school. She's going there. She's all getting ready. She's one of those that goes through the list. She's like, Dad, I'm like, what? Where's my red pen? I don't know. I need a red pen right now. And I'm like watching her just start spinning. And she's really mad and she starts yelling at me, I need the red pen now. And I'm like, okay. And I went and I gave her a hug and I said, honey, 6th grade's going to be okay. Burst into tears. I'm just so scared. And I can't believe it. I'm like, it's okay. So one of your walkaways today is there's 2 levels of communication. Red pen, and I'm as nervous as hell about going to 6th grade, okay? If you start arguing about the red pen, you don't need a red pen today. That's okay. You don't need that red pen. What are the chances I'm going to convince my 6th grader who's nervous out of her mind that she didn't need a red pen? I didn't want to have that discussion about a red pen. I wanted to have the discussion of, you're okay. All right? And that was on one of my good days, okay? There are bad days. And I engaged, I fought, and then afterwards, like, dang, I didn't get the Father of the Year award on that one. So there are moments, and we'll talk about recovery from those. So when you see someone irritable and crying, try to look at it. Are they being cranky, or is there anxiety underneath? We get a lot of people, a lot of kids who get brought to us who look like they're angry and they're oppositional and all these other things. And I'm like, oh, they're just really nervous. Kids that look like they're ADHD. And I figured out, they're just so nervous during class, they can't pay attention. So then I took care of the anxiety, and so then they were able to pay attention. Sadness and withdrawal, because guess what happens when you have chronic stress and you're anxious and it just keeps going and going and going? You get helpless. And learned helplessness leads to that kind of depression. So when it keeps going, you have to be careful. So look at what might be behind the sadness. Same thing with forgetting, confusing, time management. Your kid looks like they're all over the place. Sometimes if you get the anxiety, a little bit more manageable. You'll get a little bit more focused, a little more organized, you'll be able to follow through with things. Not all of them. I mean, I got one of each kid. I got one kid who remembers things, and the other kid, I'm like, that head wasn't attached to your body. Increased drug and alcohol use. One of the things that we're seeing a bit more of is pot. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit about it. It actually helps with reducing anxiety. That's the good news. The bad news is that it has a lot of negative side effects. So it's just like medication. You go in for medication, okay, I need this, what are the positive effects and what are the negative effects? But we'll talk a little bit about that, what we're seeing in increase in action, like where they just get frozen. I'm sure you've seen that kind of deer in the headlight situation. Got so much stress and anxiety, it's like if I just hold still, everything else will disappear around them. There's actually a biological process where people will pass out and they think it has to do with, like, when the stress gets really high, it means that the tiger's about to get you. So if you play dead, then maybe it will kill you. So they think there's an evolutionary process of like, okay, you just pass out. So, nightmares and sleepwalking. You know sleepwalking is related to anxiety as well? Yeah. Anyone have a sleepwalker or someone who's like, so it usually will go up a little bit, and nightmares will go up a little bit, but not night terrors. Any questions about this part? Yeah.
It's more of a thought than a question, but I often find that I straddle the line between coddling when the red pen is lost and just sort of trying to toughen it up. But,
Again, I probably would err a little bit on the other side when I could. You don't always want to do that. Like, I wouldn't sit there and go, okay, the red pen is way over there, and I'm going to scoot it away because I'm going to teach her a lesson. All right? I might not do that, just because I need to survive that morning. But there are a lot of times when I'm going to talk about, you're going to need to have them fix it. Okay? Because as parents, quick poll, how many of you had parents who really were involved with your application process for college? Okay. How many of you are either planning or are really involved with the application process? Right. It's just, this is a very different culture in our generation than our parents' generation. And there's good and bad that comes with it. And that's one of the reasons why I think the speaker series is about this. It's about when to kind of take that step back. All right, physical signs. There's the easy ones: the tension, chest pain, headaches, and back pain. That's like when stress is really getting high. Rapid heart rate, increasing blood pressure, stomach problems. It's interesting. I have a colleague, Dr. Hart, a GI specialist, and I'll send the clients who are just complaining about stomach issues. The top 3 symptoms of anxiety and depression of children are stomach aches. And so it's funny, I talked to Dr. Hart, he goes, there's as many neurons going to your gut as your brain. So you actually feel first in your gut, and then it sends, guess what it does to your gut when you're really anxious? It just throws off all of the balances. And the medication that he often will give to these kids who are having stomach issues? It's like Lexapro or Zoloft. It's an antidepressant anxiolytic, more than it is like a stomach-related issue or stomach medicine. He's giving these things almost as often as some of the medical stuff because the anxiety and stress is impacting your stomach so much. So if you start seeing chronic stomach problems, check your child and pediatrician, but also be aware there's a possibility of anxiety. Change in appetite. Some kids increase when they get stressed out, their appetite. Some kids, their appetite disappears. So it just depends on the kid. Lack of sleep, we'll talk about apnea. People start breaking out when they're really stressed. Question? Yeah.
So should I assume that if my kid is having a lot of headaches and stomach aches, even though he's otherwise cheery and seems well adjusted, that he's stressed?
I wouldn't assume that. I would first go to the medical explanation, but there's a big possibility. Some kids will appear, again, at a young male, and he's like, yeah, I'm not stressed, because every time he got stressed, he started joking around. He's checking his back and having all this fun. I'm like, yeah, you are. You had a panic attack last week. And so even though he was like coming off as everything was fine, right underneath that was anxiety. Because you have like, oh, there's anxiety, and run over here, run over there. But it creeps up, it follows you. And so there is a possibility, and you get checked out. So.
I think this goes to the last slide, but I don't know where this falls, but it's what I would call sort of this absolutism. So if a child is confronted with an experience that they're unfamiliar with, they're overwhelmed, they don't know how to navigate it, it's almost like they know when something's reasonable, when something makes sense, but when something doesn't make sense. And I'm trying to talk to my daughter, there's sort of this world that exists that I, as her mother, do not understand, right? So it's sort of like, no, it's this way, and there's nothing in between. And what I'm trying to do is change her perception, because I know it's actually not like that, and by the way, in 5 minutes, it's going to change because these are girls, right? And then it's going to change because they're going
You can have the best day and worst day all in one day.
yeah, and so, but what can happen, and I'm sure this happens to other mothers, is that, you know, you get shut down because you don't understand, because it's this way or that way. And there's nothing in between, and then sure enough, a week later, everything changes, and, you know, but in the meantime, I don't want her to, you know, focus on something that's going to be irrelevant in 5 days.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, one of the things I'm going to talk about, since you brought it up, is that sometimes you can't teach a lesson in that moment because you're trying to help them perceive the situation. It's not as bad as you think, and you go through that whole thing, and they're like, no, it's bad, it's really, really bad, and they're just convinced. And like, okay, take a deep breath, let's get through this. And then afterwards, now you use that as your teaching moment. You go, okay, now let's talk about this. Are you okay now? Are you surviving? Because one of the things, in fact, and I'm going to talk about it in a second, that teens don't have, and kids don't have the wisdom to know that this too shall pass, that this isn't as big of a deal, so they just don't have that many life experiences to draw on. And so it does look like it's going to be the end of the world if they don't get invited to that birthday party or they get a B on that test. I mean, it just really feels that way. And we have to let them go through some life experiences, and then you do that quick reflection. You go, okay, you good now? You made it through that, didn't you? And then you get them to see, and over time, then the wisdom creates a different perception.
I want to ask about nail biting. When my son always bit his nails since 7, 8 years old, and now he's 14, and I see that in the last year it's become much more serious level of nail biting.
I know, at one point you put the little gloves on their hands and stuff, because I mean, we've done everything.
I mean, even the nasty tasting
Oh, yeah.
yellow, she would just ignore it.
Yeah, my son was a thumb sucker, so you put the little things on the thumb, you put the little stuff on there, you try to like punish him if he does it, you try all the different things. It's difficult. You try to get them to be conscious.
Right.
It's about becoming conscious of habit.
Yeah, I mean, criticizing or saying stop biting your nails at only at the 14.
Right, at that age,
Right.
yeah, that should say.
Would it be considered one of these?
It could be. It typically, it can be just a habit, but it also usually gets exacerbated when they're anxious. So they're going to do it regardless, most likely, but it can go up when they're nervous. So, but it's not always directly related. Okay. So physical signs. All right, next one. So teenagers actually experience stress as more stressful. They're chock full of hormones. They are looking at things in much more kind of dramatic ways. Like what was mentioned, it's kind of like this is the end of the world. Again, it goes back to that kind of black and white, we call it catastrophic thinking. So they're actually looking at the world in a different way than you. Okay? So try to sit back, look at it through their eyes, and help them see the other side eventually. A lot of times the stress will interfere with the frontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for what's called executive functioning, planning, organizing, anticipated consequences, and things like that. Teenagers actually have the intelligence in some ways as an adult. It's the frontal cortex sometimes that, like, they know the right decision. They know you're not supposed to drive fast. You know you shouldn't have that party at the house. But they still make the decision because they don't necessarily anticipate all those consequences. But they know that they shouldn't. Okay. All right, long-term effects. Again, this is the negative side. This is when it gets into toxic stress. This isn't necessarily like, hey, they went through going to a new school, or even a divorce. Remember, it can go either direction. So I don't want to freak people out and go, oh my God, every time you have stress, you're going to get into the psychiatric issues of depression, of PTSD, and OCD, drug and alcohol abuse. That is something to be aware of. If your kid is having issues with anxiety, they'll have a tendency to self-medicate. Alcohol and marijuana are the two main things that they're going to go to. So it is something to keep an eye on. We've seen all sorts of issues, even diabetes. I had a friend of my daughter's friend who ended up becoming diabetic. And I swear, I have no physical evidence of it, but she was just stressed out of her mind, and then suddenly no signs of diabetes before, and just bam.
Type 2 or type 1?
F1, no, she's insulin dependent. Yeah, just hit her. And wow. So there is some research that supports it. So again, we want to keep our kids cool as a cucumber. Brain development changes. All right. Again, don't freak out. Your kid's allowed to have stress. Stress is good. But if you have super high levels of stress, they say that certain parts of the brain will be a little smaller. Remember I said about that remapping thing? So when you have high levels of stress, it's harder for kids to learn information. In fact, one of the things that I used to do, I used to teach at St. Monica College. And before tests, I would sit there and go, okay, everybody just sit there. And I want you to close your eyes. And what I'm going to do is run you through a little bit of imagery, and I'm going to relax you and make you cool as a cucumber. And I used to do this pre-test, post-test. I would do pre-test without it and then pre-test with it. And it would work. And people, because you could start retaining, you could retain information and you could access information. Because what happens with anxiety is it's almost like a block in the brain. It's like instead of the information to go and hold, grab hold of something, something for my test, I'm thinking about what am I going to see on this? My mom and dad are going to kill me. Okay, now you're not getting at the information you need. The brain is literally sending all of the energy or some of the energy somewhere else. Okay, so it's calm. It'll actually help the grades. Yeah.
Then it leads to rebuilding.
Yeah, so what I was talking about earlier is what can happen is that if you have a chronic stress and you tend to be then, we call it hypervigilant. You start to be you're always looking for things, what's going to happen, and you have this anxiety reaction to even small things. And so your brain will kind of get predisposed in that direction. So you can you literally can try to help a brain become cool as a cucumber, or it can be a super reactive brain. Again, within limits. It's not like you're going to take someone, who is on one extreme and move them all the way over here. You're going to move them a certain way.
How do you help?
Definitely. Not going to leave you hanging.
Okay, I'm getting overreacted.
Breathe. All right, characteristics of kids. Some of these are pretty, this is just a slide to kind of reiterate what you probably already see. If your kid is already anxious, when I see kids who are in kindergarten, they're having separation anxiety, they're already overreacting, guess what? Later on, they're going to tend to be reactive to stress and things like that. Isn't that an interesting one, to take things personal? And it's like, talking to me. These kids that are just they think it's all about them and they over-personalize, they tend to get stressed about situations. So because instead of a situation just being, it just is, it's it's all of a sudden about them. And so that stresses them out. Negative, unrealistic, pretty standard. If you have a kid who's well, I'm just going to do terrible at school, or no one's going to be my friend. Guess what? Any event that confirms that, because once in a while stuff like that happens, right? They didn't invite you over to the house, you didn't go over to the sleepover. It's going to happen. But if you already have a negative view, now what happens is that it gets expanded or it gets amplified because of their view. So the event happens, now you amplify it with the view, now it's a really stressful event. So that's why I'm always working with kids and parents to help kids to change that. Black and white thinking. Any questions about that?
Oh, not that one. I just was backtracking. You were saying that there were 3 top signs of anxiety and depression, stomach problems being one. What are the other 2 that are top?
I would say that the top ones would be the stomach aches, so physiological, the irritability is the top one, and the restlessness and nervousness. Another one that's not on the list usually are kids with tics. Most tics are transitory. They'll just come in and out within about 6 months, so don't get really upset. But kids with tics seem to have a predisposition towards being reactive to stress.
trying to get just a tiny bit confused on anxiety versus stress.
Yeah.
Stress leads to anxiety. Somebody can be anxious, but somebody cannot be stressed. Can you just kind of give me a
So stress is kind of low-level anxiety. Stress is actually healthy until it gets to the point of anxiety. So stress, you go, and there's, again, the 3 levels of the stress. And I'll use the words, and I should have probably explained it, like when you're at toxic stress, now we're getting to the level of anxiety. So those would be more interchangeable. And sometimes I'll even say low levels of anxiety is healthy. Like, because you can be anxious or stressed about a performance coming up, and that's natural. So it's just when it interferes with their ability to, think straight, when it interferes with their interactions with you, when they become really irritable or depressed, that's when it gets pathological. So, does that help?
but you don't use them interchangeably. They're 2 different.
Entities? Yes and no.
Interchangeable. Okay.
I use them interchangeably, but stress, I would say with the layperson, is probably, more the healthy side of anxiety. How's that? All right, healthy ways to talk about emotions. Okay, first thing, everybody stay calm, okay? There's this thing called social referencing. And that is that when there is a situation that could be anxiety-provoking or stressful, you're kind of wondering how to respond. If you look at the person next to you and they're freaking out, they're screaming, they're going crazy, guess what your brain's going to do? It's going to get anxious instead of get upset. If you look at the other person, which is you should, and they're calm, they're like, hey, we're good, this is going to be fine, guess what? You'll tend to calm down. So the first thing that you can do when someone is stressed out about, all the tests and what's coming up, and I don't care, if even in the back of your head, you're ready to explode, and you're like, I don't want you to get that bad grade either, goddammit. Keep it here. Don't let it get here, okay? And there's going to be reasons why, because it will affect your relationship with them. So staying calm, I know it's super simple for me to say, and it's super simple for me to suggest. Hard to do though, isn't it? It is hard to do. So sometimes I give breaks, I tell parents all the time, I go, when you're losing your marbles or you're anxious, just check out and say, we're going to come back to this. Mom's going to get a timeout, or Dad's going to get a timeout. We'll come back to this in a minute.
Yeah, I just had a question. Do you have, on that point, any recommendations for specific techniques on how to do that? Because,
Absolutely.
So much damage is done in life by people who explode and then later regret it, and then it's too late.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you over the years have learned to try and recommend ways to kind of not do that, not behave that way, and just...
Absolutely. I'm going to give you a couple now, and then I have a whole slide on it. The first thing is going to sound super simple, but I'm going to have you do it. Breathe. I want you to take a breath, and I want you to count to 8 as an inhale. I want you to hold it for 1 second, and then I want you to exhale and count to 8. You have to go all the way to 8. As you exhale, and I want you to let your shoulders drop. So follow me. Simple, isn't it? I did this with a kid the other day. Oh my God. He's a little spagolious, but that's all right. I can't believe how we just got from that. Real simple, but the first thing we do is breathe. It's funny, I didn't mention the earlier slide, one of the physical signs of overreaction to stress is holding your breath. Often I'm sitting across from a client, I'm like, you're not breathing. You got to take a breath somewhere in there. So keep an eye on your breath. It's the simplest thing. Your brain has a two-way communicator with the lungs. Brain tells the lungs, hey, breathe really heavy because we got to go around. And the lungs communicate to the brain, hey, guess what? It's time to cool up. Okay? Literally, when you slow down your breathing, you slow down the sympathetic nervous system. So the very first thing that you always do is breathe slow and calm down. The other thing is if you or your child are stressed out, you have to then come back to it. I'm not kidding. I do this all the time with parents. I'll say, listen, if either of you are losing your marbles during a conversation, you're so stressed out, guess what? That frontal part of the brain is like shut down, and the only thing that's actually activated is the reptilian brain, which is way down there, and it's not really going to be rational. So the second thing is make sure that if anyone's escalated, that you postpone conversations until you are calm. Because otherwise you're not having a conversation with a person. This is good in marital issues too, brother. So calm down and then de-escalate and then communicate. Yeah.
One thing that has worked for me in the past, I know every child is different, but is different perspective because they tend to accelerate themselves. When I have this meeting and sort of like, let's write it down. You know, it's a really everything you do tomorrow. How can you spread it out? You know, because and literally write it down. And also, how real is that thought? Because sometimes it's not, you know.
Especially with teenagers, one of the most disarming things in one of the situations, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, is that if you just empathize, because a child will spend their entire conversation convincing you of their plight in life. I need to go to that party on Friday night, otherwise I'll be socially executed. Okay? So if you just start talking about going to the party or not, you've already lost. So the first part, when you're talking to your kids when they're stressed out about something, is empathize. Yeah, you know, you got that test coming up. It's nerve-wracking, you know, there's some pressure here. It's I completely get this. So make sure you do that, and then you go to the feedback. Model the emotional communication by talking to your kids about your own feelings. One of the neat things that I tell parents to do is I bet you don't think aloud a lot. Like, you don't talk about your stress. It's actually good to talk about, like, gosh, you know, I got this presentation coming up that I got to get ready for. You actually talk to your kids about it because then you teach them how to cope with it. So it's a good thing. Because a lot of times parents are like, I can't go into any of my stress. It's bad, very, very bad. No, actually, you want them. Sure, if you're losing your marbles and you're bawling and you're wailing, probably not good. Okay, so everything in moderation, folks. So do a little bit of reassurance that anxiety or stress is normal, and we're going to get through this. So my ask, don't tell is usually the top 5 things that I tell parents to do. Folks, this is in my top 5 parenting suggestions on almost anything, okay? When you talk to your kids and they express that they're stressed about something, what is their inclination? What do we want to do? Solve it. Here, this is what you do with that. I had a parent in the office, and they've been doing this over and over, and the kid was, going away, and she goes, and I told him to do this, and I told him, he's breaking up with his girlfriend, and I told him to do it this way, and I told him to do it that way, and I told him to do it this way, and I was like, did you ever ask him what he was going to do at any point of this? Because he might have actually told you what he was going to do, and it was already what you were going to suggest, and so now he can say, I did it my way. So try to let kids actually figure some of these things out on their own. One of the other things to do when you're communicating, this is a key. I had trouble with this. When I was talking to my kid about studying for ACT, studying for classes. He's a senior, he's going through the application, and like each conversation at dinner time, every time he was in the car and I was taking him to do something, we're talking about getting into college. And he was like, Dad, for the love of God, can we stop talking about this? Oh yeah, I tell people to not do this. So I went up and it became his anxiety. So one of the things that you want to do is compartmentalize. I always tell parents, it's a social embassy, an emotional embassy at dinner time. You don't talk about stressful things or things that like, did you do your homework for this? And did you, fill out this application? Dinner time is like when they can sit there and just relax. What I like to do is a couple things. What I do with my son, I said, I'm going to text you. I'm not going to actually have the conversation. I'm just going to text you when I'm not around. It actually works because then he was less testy. Because every time you remind the teenager to do something, they roll their eyes and look, I got to handle it, or I'm going to do it, and then they don't, of course. But so what I did is I go, okay, I want to decrease the conflict. I'm going to do some texting. I'm going to tell you these are the things that need to happen. And then when I was with them, I'm like, hey, how's it going? You know, how was your day? What was work like? What was class? And then you're having, there's two parts of parenting: relating and managing. We spend about 90% of our time managing our kids, and we forget to relate. And then their stress goes up. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I found with my daughter, for example, is like when you're talking about, not resolving for them because obviously you want them to find a solution right away. It's like I make her very present to the anticipation she has about something, like homework. Oh my God, I have so much homework. Where are you now? In the parking lot? Did you see the tree next to you? Do you see? Then we can think about the homework when you're actually there. And I do a lot of still management, but I think that she gets a little bit the perception. And what I found very effective is that afterwards to say, did you see how you coped with that? Wasn't that cool? How you were actually able to get over it and pass it? So the reinforcement afterwards, like,
Huge. That's your teaching moment. When they make it through a stressful event, the teaching moment is usually afterwards. All right. So I'm just going to mention these, and then I'm going to go, there's a slide on each one. So ways to cope, ways to help kids deal with stress. Modifying their lifestyle or your lifestyle, changing perspective, learning emotional regulation, developing problem-solving skills, reaching out for support. Number one correlate with mental health is your perceived social support. So if you've got peeps to be able to talk to, you tend to be less stressed. Strengthening conflict resolution skills, including between you and them, and building resilience. I'm not going to do that. All right, start with yourself. Balance. This is something that I'm dealing with. I'm a Libra, so I always think of balance. We have to try to keep life in balance. This is probably one of the top stressors, the cram schedule. Often, I see parents who are like forgetting they want to put as many things on the application to college. Like, well, you need to have your community service. You need to play an instrument. You need to be on varsity 4 years. And you have to enter every class. Okay, you just stress them out of their minds. Okay, they don't need all those things to get into college, by the way. Pick some things that they're strong in, and pick other things. Let them let go of the things they're not as strong in. It's okay. They'll find where they need to go. So making sure that they're doing exercise. I read another article. I swear, it seems like every other week I read an article about how exercise is helping out with reducing stress, depression, helps with their cognitive ability. They tend to be smarter. One of the things that you have to know is that parents tend to get a bit over-involved with each of the aspects of the child's life. So if something negative happens, we want to fix it. So if our child doesn't get invited to the birthday party, the child's in 3rd grade, they're invited to the birthday party, we almost react more than the child does. But like, it could be even a sleepover. Sometimes I've seen parents, they go, the parent is fit to be tied, like, I'm never going to be friends with those parents, and I'm going to never, talk to them, and my child's going to be ruined. I go, does your child know that they didn't get invited? Like, do you think you could take your child out that night, and so maybe, they won't? I know social media, it's harder to get away with that, because now you see all the things that you miss. Try not to compare, like, oh, I'm seeing all the other children who are taking all the AP classes or the honors classes or in the higher level of sports. We make a lot of comparisons, and then we wonder, I wonder what all those parents think about me, because my kids in regular soccer, they're not in the club soccer. Both of my kids played AYSO for about 9 years, okay? And my daughter never scored a goal. I got a great story. All right, make sure you create the balance, reduce stressful activities, energy drinks. I had a kid show up to my office one time. He had drank 2 Monsters. I swore he was on meth. He was like, what's wrong with you? Like, sit still. I was like, you probably shouldn't do 2 Monsters before coming to therapy. Relationships. I get a lot of kids who are stressed out about their friends. I'm not telling you to like drop their friend, but like again, they'll be talking about, oh, I got this friend Susie and she's hurting herself. And I feel like I'm the only person that she can talk to, so I'm going to stay up all night and, you know, she'll text me and make sure she's okay. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of responsibility and a lot of stress. So I'm not telling you to eliminate them completely, but we have to reduce it and also help them understand the role. Because relationships can be really stressful. Every night, when I would go through a routine, like I just did that little breathing exercise, when at night when my kids were in elementary school, we go through a routine. You know, you kind of go through like shower, you brush your teeth, read Harry Potter, and then my daughter or my son would say, tell me things to think about. I'm a shrink, so I have like Jedi skills with like hypnosis, and I was able to get them to calm down. But I literally would do a guided imagery and teach my children how to relax by run this nice blue color through your body. Guess what? They have apps now called Headspace and Insight Timer and all these different things that can help teach kids how to relax. We are all pushing our kids to do things and do more of this, do more of that. We actually don't talk to our kids about how to relax. And so my kids would always say, hey, Daddy, tell me things to think about. And it was an intrinsic way that they now, even today, my daughter's a volleyball player in college. And I go, Dad, you know, you have a great serve. You know, she does other things she's not so great at. She's a great serve. She goes, yeah, Dad, you know, remember that blue thing you used to tell about? Right before I go up to serve, I think about blue, calm myself down, and I will get it in. Wow, that's really cool. Well, there was a few other times that I didn't get the reward.
Do teens have the same reaction that I'll say I do when people say relax? That just sends me to orbit. I find that not helpful.
When I was doing some guided imagery with a client, and I was using the like a term saying to say relax yourself. She opened her eyes and she's like, I hate it when people say relax to me. Okay, let's find another one. But you're absolutely right. Because sometimes parents will just say, just relax. And it actually provokes kids that they're not feeling understood. So yeah, you have to find certain things that will help out. This is the cornerstone of my talk. This slide. Feelings come from perceptions. What you need to do is to help people, help your child, have perceptions that are less threatening. One of the things that you do is increase their internal locus of control. One of the things that kids will do when they come and they go, oh, I totally screwed it up, or I got a C on this test, or I messed up on the soccer game, and I look at them and I go, good news. And they go, what? I go, it's your fault. And they're like, what? And I go, hey, guess what? You didn't prepare, or there are certain things that happen. If it's your fault, think about it. You can do something about it. I can't do anything about that hurricane that's coming down on my daughter tonight, right? But I can do a lot of things to prep and make sure that she's well, taken care of, and that her coach is in contact with her. So there's a lot of those things that I can do. But what we do is that we blame the world. We call it externalizing. We say, hey, something outside of me, that's the reason why. Guess what that does? It makes you feel helpless. It makes you feel like you can't do anything. And then the next stressful situation that comes down the pipe, you're like, well, I don't know, it could be that really bad teacher, it could be that really bad class. There's nothing I can do about this. Actually, you can. You can adjust. You can learn with the teacher, how they test. You can meet with the teacher. There are things that you can do. Internal locus of control is a very important thing to reduce a kid's stress. Because if they walk around with a big B on there and they just feel like they're a victim, guess what? Your kid is going to be very susceptible to the kind of vicissitudes of life and not necessarily prepared to deal with things. So I do this all the time. And there are kids that I get just born with this kind of like, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault. They're just born that way. And you see them.
How do you help children not be resistant to tools you give them or others give them? For instance, to stay calm, to listen to a meditation app before taking a major test, or just not resist changing that perspective.
Make it their idea. So if you could try to make it their idea, you got to sometimes be subtle about it. So this is a quick little story. daughter's in 6th grade, she's on the bus for the first time, and Johnny's sitting next to her and goes, just harassing her. Thinking to myself, okay, Johnny has the house for my daughter, and this is his way to make this happen. So she comes up and she's like, Dad, Johnny's sitting there making all this, this, he's bugging me, he's poking at me and all this. So, of course, I come up with a great sage advice, right? I'm a psychologist, I deal with this all the time. And she's rolling her eyes going, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and that's not going to work. And I'm like, okay, I got to go to plan B. So then I went to, instead of me telling, I started asking. I go, oh, what do you think? What can you do? And then she's like, well, I tried moving my seat. And then we proceed to go through the different, possibilities. But it was me, I stopped telling, and I started asking. I don't know, did you try that? You try this? What do you think about that other thing? Oh, that didn't work, how come? Now, sometimes your kid's gonna still go, well, you still were no help, right? And they leave. And they come back, and they're like, so how'd it go? Well, it got better. I'm like, what happened? Well, I sat next to Susie. Susie's really strong, and she told him to get the hell out of here. And of course, she's never going to give me the satisfaction of telling me that was my great idea. It just happened to occur. But so you have to be a little bit subtle. Try to take the side door, get their idea. Sometimes you ask someone else to help out. I love when parents are in the room and I'm sitting across from the child and I say something to the child and they're like, yeah. The parent looks over at the child, I said the exact same thing. Sorry. So sometimes what you do is you pull in reinforcement, and it could be one of the counselors here, it could be a teacher. There are a lot of great people at this school that have helped a lot of kids. I've worked with this school for over 20 years and have met with and worked with administration counselors, and there are people too that can help out with that. So sometimes if they just hear it from somebody else, it will get better. Changing perspective. So don't give a trophy for last place.
No.
Okay? So one time I'm driving home with my son, and we used to do this reflection time after sports. So he was in AYSO, 12 guys are on the team, and I said, so Matthew, how do you think you did on there? He goes, well, I think I was okay, defended pretty well, I wasn't moving as fast. And he goes, how do you think I did, Dad? And I said, I thought you sucked. He literally said, what kind of psychologist are you? He was about 8 years old. I'll wait for it. And I don't know, you weren't moving, you were dragging, it was really tough. You just didn't seem like you had your heart in it. Okay. I go, you had a sleepover last night. And guess what? You probably were up really late and you just didn't do that well. He's like, I know. I go, so does it really matter if you didn't do that well in today's game? I was like, no. Well, see, that wasn't so bad. So what about the team? There's about 10 players, 12 players. Where do you think you're on the team? He's like, number 4 or 5. I'm like, I think that's pretty accurate. And I go, what if you were the worst soccer player on the team? Does that matter? And he goes, no. And I go, what matters? He goes, that we love each other and we're healthy. I'm like, see, I'm a good psychologist. But you see, what I'm trying to do is put in perspective, folks. That game did not matter. Okay, it wasn't like the world championship was riding on that, and his contract for millions of dollars was on this lawn.
You weren't very popular with the coach.
No, there are times when I'm not popular with coaches. And I'm doing a talk on the 24th of October. I'm talking about over-specialization in sports and putting pressure on young athletes. I have 2 athletes. I deal with this all the time, and we're going to do a free talk over at the Civic Center. So. There are not going to be a lot of coaches coming to that.
You have some of us who have overachieving kids.
They're like self-imposing
yes,
pressure.
and whose whole world collapses when they get a C. And I don't know what it is about this generation of kids or maybe past parents. What is wrong with a C? It is satisfactory. When you translate a C into words, it's satisfactory. And the whole world, I was like, but it's satisfactory. It's one of your worst subjects, except the fact that you're not going to be a genius and whatever. But the whole world collapses because you don't understand. Only losers get C's. You know what I'm saying? Putting it into perspective, but I feel like I'm talking against the wind.
You are. You're swimming upstream. And it's one of the things that I would ask my son, okay, so you're not the best soccer player. What are some things you do? And yes, what you want to do is help your child see that they don't have to be good at everything. So often these kids put the stress of, I have to be perfect at everything. No, you can suck at things and do it. I'm still not on the world tennis tour. I play tennis, but I'm not on the world tennis tour. It's okay. And it's about having your kids, hey, you got to see. World's still turning on its axis. You still got invited back to class. You didn't get dropped. We're pretty good. It's about doing this over and over and over. One of the things that I also do, like increasing perceptual flexibility. So let's say your kid's doing a move. And they're like, this is the worst thing in the world. It's going to be awful. I'm never going to see my friends, and I'm going to miss my house, and Fido's not going to have a great backyard, whatever it is. And they're just looking at this big situation as awful. It's all bad. So what I do, because I'm working with the kid, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm not going to argue with it. So let's look at the little points here. Have you seen a picture of the house that you're going to move into? Show me a picture. Like, hey, tell me about it. And they go, oh, well, look at this. Hey, this room, my room's actually bigger than the other room. This is kind of cool. I'm like, oh, really? And so then I'm getting a little data here. And so then I go, oh, are there going to be any kids in the neighborhood? Or is this like one of those old folks' homes or something like that? It's right down the street from the park and, the middle school. Wow, okay. So there's going to be some friends. See what I'm doing? I'm not arguing with the child about the big thing like, hey, you're a failure or not a failure. What I'm doing is getting into the specifics. And I'm having them do it. Back to the question, like, hey, if the resistance and thing, now I'm having them do it. Because now after they say, hey, yeah, the room's a little bigger, I'm like, oh, really? That's kind of cool. And so I'm sneaking it in there. And you could do that as a parent. You could actually sneak in the kind of cognitive flexibility of like, don't look at it like dogmatically. It's not all bad or all good. Expectations. How many of you got up at 5 in the morning and ran a mile, did a list of things that you were going to do today, and planned out your weekend? You did. I know you keep your hand down for a little bit. I'm going to see the So we're not all reaching 100% of our potential, right? How many times do I actually? I had $1 for every time that a parent came into my room, and I feel this pain too. Okay, I have a child who I'm like, you just did a little bit harder, you would actually get a couple more A's, or you'd get a couple more of these, a couple more of those. I get it, guys. I'm right there with you. I have this inclination to go, maybe just nudge a little bit. But I'm not reaching 100% of my absolute potential and doing all the things that I'm trying to tell my kid or thinking my kid should do. So have some reasonable expectations. Try to keep it real. Self-regulation. Losing our marbles. The first thing is that deep breathing. One time I was going to school and I had a kid who was anxious, and literally, I showed up to the class, or the office, he's having a panic attack in the nurse's office. I'm like, wow, I gotta really step up my game. So I go into the office and I go, hey, take a look at me. And I did the social referencing, stare at my face, and then I did the whole thing. Watch what I'm breathing, take a deep breath, hold for a second, exhale, and he got out of the panic attack within about 30 seconds. So, self-regulation, physical and cognitive. There's the physical part, and then there's kind of the cognitive where you do kind of self-reassuring. Funny story. So I was doing triathlons for a while, right? And if you don't know a triathlon, there's a swimming part, and you have to swim with a whole bunch of people, and they're all hitting you at the same time, so it's like a mosh pit in the water, and you have to get to the other side. I'm like, oh my God. So my daughter knew I was nervous, and so she sent me a video of Dory in Finding Nemo. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Crack it up, right? Swear to God. So then I kind of ran it through my head a bunch of times. I'm in the start line, there's about 60 of us, we all jump in the water, start swimming, I'm like, okay, I'm getting hit, I think I'm gonna drown. Just keep swimming. Self-talk actually works, folks. It saved me, it got me to that finish line. So it sounds crazy, but guess what? Our brains have a lot of negative talk. And if we can teach our kids how to have some type of positive mantra or something that they can say to themselves, guess what? They'll feel a little less of the stress. So mantras are a really good thing. Okay. I've already covered some of these slides. I know we're running out of time, but one of the things, support system. Okay. Your relationship with your child is really important to help them with their stress. I get a lot of kids who come in and they're talking to me about things and they're like sharing these deep dark secrets and like, why are you not telling your parents these things? And it could be anything from, you know, they're upset that their parents were fighting, or, you know, they had an abortion. I mean, I've had it all. Why didn't you tell your parents? Why do you think they don't? Why don't you think they tell parents?
I'm disappointed.
They're going to get mad or upset and have a big reaction. So if a child is afraid you're going to have a big reaction, they won't tell you things you really want them to tell you. So you have to be really calm. I mean, both my kids, and one of the ways that you can build that relationship is being able to talk about anything. Okay? Try having a conversation about sex with your 15-year-old daughter. Okay? Not exactly funny, but if you do it, guess what? Then when they run into issues later, they'll talk to you because they know they can talk to you about anything. So I know that there's a lot of conversations that can be really uncomfortable for you. But one really key way to decrease a child's stress is for them to know that they have people to talk to. You have to be one of the central people. And so if you can keep your marbles when they tell you things, you show them that, hey, I'm open to talk about anything. They'll be able to go to you for help. Then you want backups. Hey, you know what? Make sure to build relationships with other people, friends. Help them find their peeps. Make sure that they have like adults. One of my favorite friends of my son, his name's Adrian. He will sit down and like my son will go up and start playing Fortnite, right? There we go, the back date. And Adrian will sit down next to me for a while and he goes, so Chris, how's it going? You know, how's the practice? What's happening? He's asking me questions. I'm like, who are you? Seriously, he's like on his own. He would put up the Christmas lights at his house. He would decorate things. He's a self-made kind of guy. But you want to teach your child how to interact with adults. A lot of these kids don't have great ability to kind of communicate, make eye contact and things like that. One way to decrease stress is that they have people at schools, you know, there are coaches, different people to go to. Peer relationships, relationship with adults. Mentors are a great thing, especially I teach that to college students. I go, hey, go find a mentor. Go find, like, whether it be a teacher, a dean of students, a coach, or someone like that, who they can really look up to. All right. We did the real quick problem solving. You guys know this. We don't do it. The whole problem solving where step, empathize with them. So let's do an example. A teenager wants to go to the party or go out really late on Saturday night. They come out and I will never have another friend for the rest of my life if I don't get to go to, you know, Joey's house on Saturday night. So you first empathize, hey, I get it. I want to have friends in life. Friends are important. You know, and making sure that you're a part of it, I get it, because you're going to read about it the next day in social media, right? So you empathize, you show them that you understand their plight. Then you identify the problem. There's no parent at Joey's house that night, and I'm a little worried that things are going to get a little bit wonky. And so I'm worried, and so the problem is that I have these concerns, and then you want to go do this, so we have a disagreement. Then what you do is you go through the solutions. Okay, I can breathalyze you when you get home. You know, we could sit, we could check in. You can come home at a certain time. You can sleep over there, and I'll check in with you the next day. You go through all the solutions. And I don't care if they're stupid solutions, okay? Because sometimes there'll be some really wacky solutions, and that's okay. Just put them out there. Because what you're going to do is you're going to do the pros and cons. Remember my golden rule? Don't tell, ask. You want to see what their pros and cons are. Partially because you want self-incriminating information, folks, okay? Because you will actually get more data points if you ask them, well, what do you think about this? What do you think could happen? Because sometimes the kids will say, oh yeah, Joey's friend Steve is definitely going to bring the bong and they're going to start getting stoned. And you know what? I'll make sure that I'm in the other room, okay? Now you just got a little bit of information. And your child has a coping mechanism to deal with this. But if you're sitting there too busy saying, there's going to be drugs and there's going to be alcohol and I don't want you to go, now you're not getting any information. They're shutting down and you lose it. So that's what I said. Try to have the conversation. these are real quick. We've talked about it. If you have a kid that has an easy temperament, high self-esteem, able to let your kid make mistakes, okay? Try to let your child make a mistake and then learn from it. In the back of your head, remember the back of the head thing? It could be like, I want to strangle you. I told you 15 times not to procrastinate for that test and to make sure to do X, Y, Z, and you didn't do it. You want to give lecture 105 of, I told you so. Save it, go to them and say, so, what do you think happened? What can you learn from it? What would you do different next time? What do you think? Because they'll tell you, and now they own it. Because if you tell them, they're just not going to do it just because you said it. But if you ask them and they come up with the idea, it gets through the resistance. Hopeful outlook, goals, taking responsibility. That's a tough one. Remember I said about the internal locus of control? It's key. When you are interacting with your child, when I'm not having one of my parents of the year moments, I will go to my child and if after a conflict, I'll say, okay, I know that didn't go well. Here's what I did and what I need to do different. I always start. This is good in marriage, by the way, guys. And then what you do is you ask them. So you model how to actually, resolve this in the future, own your part. But what you want to do is show them that you can take responsibility. So you have to model it first. Because so often as parents we go, you're not admitting to your fault in this. And you're just going after them. And they will die on that hill. They will not give in. They will not admit that they're wrong if they don't feel safe to do so. So you have to make it safe. All right. These are the things that can happen that can cause lots of people stress or anxiety. All right. Last couple slides. So, responsibility. Again, this is a summary of what we've covered, teaching them to learn from the failures and mistakes, avoid shaming. It's a tough one to let go of. Teach the model of success. It's funny. A lot of times parents are like, well, if they fail at this, then they're going to be a failure. I'm like, no. I had a guy one time who said, couldn't get through college, but I learned how to be a ski patrol. Ski patrol? Yeah, we had to build a cave, and live in it in the ice, and you had to learn how to throw dynamite off the hill, we had to save people. He goes, I learned how to take care of things, and I succeeded at it, and now I have my own company, and I'm really successful. So you can teach your child how to succeed at something in small ways, and they can apply it to other things in their life. Don't think because they're not succeeding at the thing that's right in front of them that they're going to be a failure. Find something that they can succeed in. And then they learn that model of success inside. It builds a resilience and a protection against some of those stress. All right. A couple slides. So these are just the 4 or 5 different areas. So when you're trying to help your child with the stress and you're trying to protect them from it, there's the cognitive, what they're thinking, their perception. There's the physical, make sure they're exercising and sleep. California is looking at making school a little bit later. Amazing. Because a bunch of neurologists are going, hey, our teenagers are not functioning and their brains aren't developing when they're sleeping, 5 or 6 hours. By the way, not a great idea to let kids stay up really late, go to school, come home and sleep for 3 hours, and then stay up till 2 or 3 o'clock. The brain does not necessarily like that over time. Emotional, teach your kids how to express themselves. Make sure that you have a good relationship and they have friends and good mentors. And sometimes spiritual. Sometimes having a minister, a rabbi, someone that they can go to. But teaching them to get outside of themselves. I have a guy that works for me, Josh, and he actually took my family. We went down to Mexico to the orphanage. And it really kind of teaches us, get out of yourself. Remember how we're like, okay, everything comes down to this test. No, when you go and do things outside of yourself, you tend to get a broader perspective on things, and you tend to be less stressed about your immediate little kind of failures or faults. Okay, so make sure to try to have your child do something outside of themselves, some type of resources. Again, this school has a lot of people. I've worked with Claudia and Kathy, Mara, Alan. There are people, I've had people who are super stressed. I help them through it, communicate with the school, we can get you through it, okay? So parents sometimes say, well, I don't want to tell, my teacher that my child's going through this stress. It's okay. Your teacher's not going to punish you because your child's under stress. They're actually going to listen to you and support you. So don't hesitate to ask for help. And real quick about my practice, again, what I do is individual, couples, and group therapy. I've already told you, I deal with perceptions and how you see the world, whether it be depression or anxiety. If we change how you think, we change how you feel. Do a lot of family therapy. Sometimes parents don't even bring in their kids. They just come in and they say, I need a little bit of help, okay? I got to figure out how to manage my teenager. Love working with parents and helping you to keep me, from having to see your kids. That's fine too. Sometimes we just have the whole family in together, and that's always good fireworks. Sometimes you're wondering if your kid has ADHD, learning issues, so we do psychological testing. And also even depression, anxiety. We have a person that does medication. And then I hired a couple people in the last few years. It's been really exciting. A sports psychologist and humanitarian therapist. What is that? It's really cool. It's Josh, the guy that takes people into the orphanages, takes you to the food banks. And again, kind of like life coaches, teenagers and young adults, and really helps them kind of get outside of themselves. And the sports psychology is just that, trying to help you reach the people. Thank you. I know we went over a little bit, tried to cover a lot of info, so I really appreciate you coming in this morning. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Is there a term for the process of interpreting a normal level of stressful event as an existential threat or, a really threatening thing? Is it just catastrophizing?
Catastrophizing is how we would do it. That's usually a cognitive error. It's like if a kid is going through things and they tend to make a mountain out of a molehill. We call it catastrophizing. So if they're having an overreaction, like when I have kids in my office and I'm teaching them how to assess a situation. Young kids, I'll get a thermometer, I'll go 1 from 10, 1 to 10. Hey, what are some of the, is this a 10, like equivalent to your house burning down and losing all your belongings? They're like, no, this is more of a 2. So you teach kids on how to have a perspective. All right, I will stay here. So if you do have other questions, again, thank you very much.